Good morning. Good morning. All right. We are continuing our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. We have 2 more weeks of it, and then we're going to be on to Song of Songs. So today we're going to be covering chapters 6 through 8, Advice for a Fulfilling Life. Our class objectives for today is to wrestle with Solomon's sometimes surprising or difficult teachings on wisdom, desire to gain more wisdom from the Lord, and I forgot to put this one on the slide, but why do good people suffer is also something we'll be touching on today. All right, so let us begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we could gather together to study your word, to be strengthened in our faith, and to take the lessons from the book of Ecclesiastes out into the world and into our lives, and let it help us to be a light that shines for you, Lord. In your name, amen. All right, so chapter 6 in brief, the teacher once again examined the nature of an unfulfilled and meaningless life. Wealth and children do not in themselves bring meaning to life, he argued, since a human being's appetite is never satisfied. People are constantly grasping for something more out of life, only to come to the end of life realizing they have not lived. The point Solomon was apparently making is that since we cannot fully take command of ourselves in the present, and since we do not know the future, we need to place ourselves in God's hands and trust that He knows what is good for me. So keep that in mind. But there are some things I do want to cover here in this chapter. So in verses 1 through 2, it reads, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him the power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. So what he's saying there is that you can have it all, but it's never going to be enough. And in the end, you're going to die, and all that you have is going to go to someone else, maybe to your heir, maybe to the state, maybe to a charity, but you are no longer going to be in control of all that you gathered, all that you work so hard for, and that you put so much value in your life and you work so hard for it. In fact, in verse 10, he says that, or not in verse 10, I'm sorry, but he says that, for a rich man when he dies, no one actually really cared that he died personally. They just cared that they get his money. And Solomon says it is better to have been a stillborn child who does not suffer in this world than to be that rich man who spent his entire life working hard, suffering for this wealth, but he didn't have anyone in his life who cared for him. So, and then lastly, verse 10 says, everything has been named. This is so it says everything has been named already, so you have nothing really to discover. Everything has been already, named by Adam named all the animals, right, back in Genesis. So there really is nothing new under the sun. And so to think that you're, going to achieve something like that is another point of vanity. So in the end, be satisfied with what you have instead of pursuing more and more. So, what is a good person? And I'm going to just read verse 12 at the end of chapter 6, which says, who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime? This is the very important question we're going to be covering today. So, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death better than a day of birth. So, a precious ointment, that's something that's very valuable, that costs a lot of money. Think the nard that the woman anointed Jesus with. That is what is kind of hinted at, and that having a good reputation is better than having wealth. And that the day of death, better than the day of birth. Now that's an interesting one, right? Because when you are mourning someone, right, as we see in the next verse, it can make you confront death and think about what you're doing with your life. And maybe this will bring you towards God. So as it says in verse 2, it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. So You can go on having fun and enjoying your life, and you're not going to think about anything. You're just going to distract yourself with pleasures, and that's not going to help you, draw closer to God. But when someone close to you dies, you're going to ask questions. You're going to, if you think about it, if you try not to bury yourself in pleasure and ponder what happened to your friend, what's going to happen to you when you die, this can bring you to God, right? So this is what Solomon's getting at here. For sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. So, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Again, that if you're someone who is thinking about things, that you're searching for wisdom, you're going to contemplate, grief and sadness, you're going to contemplate death. But the fool, he just wants to have fun, right? And he's not thinking these things, and his life is going to end very tragically. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. So this is something the world would disagree with us greatly, right? Because the world says to get the most stuff is the most good, right? Which we'll be covering in this chapter, right? That there are more valuable things than stuff. That is your character is far more valuable than your things. So, for as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This is also vanity. So the crackling of thorns is a metaphor for fire. So the crackling sound fire makes. And so this is, fools are just being burned up, beneath the pot that's making something, right? So surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. So now he is shifting into talking about politics, right? Because a bribe corrupts the heart. So you can be a very wise person, and people will come to you for advice, but then they might start paying you for that advice. And then if you're being paid for your advice, you might start modifying your advice to fit the person because you don't want to lose, this source of income. So better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and a patient spirit is better than a proud spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. So these two verses are sort of talking about political corruption, expediency, and that can make you angry when you see this political corruption, right? It's easy to become disillusioned by what you see in the world because you're not, you're not participating in that. But that's another trap because you can get angry, and angry can lead you to sin. So say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. This is warning against nostalgia because, thinking about the grass was greener, the good old days, those days probably weren't actually any better. You just have rose-tinted glasses and you're viewing them better. So it's foolish to think that those days were better and that it was better for you to be under them. And even if those days might have actually been better, suffering in the present can build your character, can bring you closer to God. So it might be a better thing for you to be in the present, where you're enduring trials than in those kinder days. So don't look back at them and dwell on the past. So, thought question. Is my approach to life too superficial or too serious? How can God help me attain a proper balance in my life? And do I tend to live in the past? If so, how might I change so that I live more fully in the present? And I think our culture today is very obsessed with the past, with nostalgia, with bringing back things that we worry. It's all over our entertainment these days, right? So, have you ever benefited from the reprimand of a wise person? If so, describe how that person's rebuke influenced you. Yes. Yeah, so Anne's talking about how she was married to a man that wasn't a Christian man, and that she prayed for a while to have a Christian husband. And she sort of gave up on that. And then some Christian women advised her to keep praying for that. And now she does have a Christian husband, so she should not have stopped praying, and asking God for that. Yes.
It may not be an actual instance for me, but in the question, if we're thinking about Proverbs, for example, with wisdom, discipline, instruction, training, being willing to be disciplined, being willing to be corrected. What we gain out of that is to have a better understanding of something that we may have done wrong or something that we can work on to do better. If these corrections or reprimands don't happen, it doesn't help us to become better at things we may not be doing well at.
Yeah, so Kenny is just talking about in Proverbs how it tells you to be disciplined and to take criticism. Taking criticism is a very important thing. You have to put your ego to the side, and examine it. Maybe it's bad criticism, but it might be good criticism. It might be them trying to help you with love, and you shouldn't reject that. I mean, the Bible itself is going to give you a lot of criticism. You need to be open to it. Yes, true. Yeah.
I think when we go to get wisdom from other people, we should be living in the present as much. We should be living in the past. That's how we get ourselves in trouble. We're just living in the present time, doing the things we want to do instead of looking at what happened in the past and looking at the wise people in our lives that have already went through that and can teach us.
Okay, yeah, this question is not so much not looking to the past for lessons, but thinking about in your younger days, maybe you were a star athlete and you're not, and you're just dwelling in that bitterness that you're not that person anymore is more, probably I didn't explain that clearly, but that is what the nostalgia is. When you're like, I was young, maybe, you were a very beautiful woman and you're regretting that as you age, right? Or, you're not as strong, you're not as fit for a guy, right? There's all sorts of stuff. Or, maybe you got in an accident and it left you crippled and you're just dwelling on what was in the past. And it's not allowing you to live in the present is more what it's about, yes. Do I have any more comments on this? Okay. So how can patience help you overcome the temptation to be prideful, angry, and envious? Yeah, so as common is that when he gets tired, he has less self-control over his anger. It's very easy to get short with people when you're tired, right? And so he just tries to be mindful of, to think about what he's angry about. Is that something even worth expending the energy at? Or should he maybe withdraw from the situation, get some rest, and so he doesn't take the chance of being angry? I know I can have a temper, and so it's something I try to think about whenever I feel a flare of anger, to go, what am I angry about? And is this anything worth being angry about? And like you said, 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's just annoying little things, and you just, I don't know, say a quick prayer to God, and then just let it go. Okay.
I think that, patience is a good thing. And long time ago, we had a Bible study. We were talking with preachers at least where it needs to go. He says, what will it matter in 50 years? And, when you tend to want to be prideful, you think about it, and what will that matter in 50 years? You're angry. Will this really matter in 50 years? Will it matter in 10? Will it matter in 5? Will it matter a week? Or getting envious over somebody, some possessions or things, does all that matter? When we know where our Creator made us and we want to be with Him, none of that matters.
Yeah, that's true. Just to be mindful that is this action you're going to do, is it going to matter in 50 years? Like, if you're getting angry about it, is that something, even worth doing? Because is it going to matter in a year? Is it going to matter in a day? Just to think about that. And I know about envy, right? I'm an author. In the world I know lots of authors that are all struggling to get an audience, to find readers. And some of them can get quite bitter because, they see other people having success and they want that and they don't get why they're not getting it. And it can be a dangerous trap to fall into. Yeah.
I believe being prideful, angry, and envious takes a lot of work. And so without even knowing it actually emotionally tears you down. So practicing patience help you get through those difficult times. But basically praying to God will give you that patience so you can avoid those.
Yeah. Yeah. So her point is that being prideful and angry and envious, it takes a lot of mental energy, emotional energy. You dwell in it, right? When you have that long term, you stew in it. And you waste so much time on this negative stuff, and then it affects your life. So if you have patience, though, and you pray to God, and you just put it into God's hands, and just, don't let these sort of negative emotions consume you, and just, trust in God that He has the right path for you. Yeah. So why does the past often look better to us than the present? Yes. Yeah, so Anne's point is that we often focus on the happy times we had, and we kind of just gloss over the worst parts, or the meh parts, right? The parts of your life that are just going to work every day, right? Because your memory holds on to like important events, significant events, but all the day-to-day details of those sort of all fade, and then you're just kind of left with this. Life kind of was better. Music was better. Well, I mean, music was better, but I used to hear that when I was 20. Old people saying like the music was better in my days. It's like, you're wrong. And now I'm like 40, and I'm like, the music was better in my day. So, yeah. It's we idealize things. That's another problem we have. So you can idealize the past, yes.
The past, you know what's happened. Whereas the present, you don't know what's going to happen. So there's uncertainty.
That's a good point. That you've known what happened in the past. There's not the frightening uncertainty of what's going to come tomorrow. And you can just sort of dwell and think things are going to be like the old days, and you don't have to worry about tomorrow. Like, I think it's called the hot hands fallacy from sports, where like if someone's always scoring goals, you just assume they're always going to keep scoring goals because you're kind of living in the past. But yeah, that's not actually how reality works. There's someone over here.
There's a really good verse in Esau that talks about this. If I could have known today what I knew back when I was 20, would that really make me better? But then you think about it, if you know that stuff, you still might still have other problems just because you knew that stuff when you were 20. You can
Yeah.
Make you the past any better than the future.
Yeah, I get.
You know what I'm trying to
Yeah, I get. You have regrets about the past, and you think of if only I did this 20 years. If I knew this 20 years ago, my life would be better today. That's another trap in nostalgia, where you're just thinking about how you could have done things differently. And there's important lessons you can learn, to think about how could I not have messed this up. But if you keep dwelling on it and you keep becoming obsessed with it, that's the trap, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be trapped that way.
Yeah. Any other comments? Oh, what just happened? It just fast forwarded to the end, right? We should be on slide 10. Did I press a bad button on here? Okay, so the next question is, what is the danger there might be in excessive? Oh, okay. Yeah, so what dangers might there be in excessive nostalgia? I think we've probably actually covered this, but if anyone else has any more comments. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so excessive nostalgia can keep you from moving forward, can keep you from developing. It's like going to a high school reunion and the guy's still wearing his Letterman jacket and he's still talking about that amazing throw he did in the 11th grade that won the big game or whatever. And it's your 20th anniversary, class reunion. You're like, okay, but what have you done since, right? Yeah. Any other points? Yes, Betty. Yeah. So Betty's point was she had a friend that lost a baby in infancy, and she had other children after that, but she never got over that death, and it affected how she raised her other children. And so we need to also be in the present for the people around us, to help them, to support them, because, grieving, it's hard to get over stuff, but we also need to keep in mind that heaven awaits us, that we're storing up treasures for something better. Yeah. Yes, Jackie.
I think some people have already said this, and I don't want to be repetitive, but we have difficulty sometimes dealing with change and learning to live with changes. Hopefully they're good changes. But often people want to look back and say, oh, it was so much better then than it is now. And that keeps them from dealing with and growing in the change.
Yeah, so humans have a hard time with change is what Miss Jackie's point was, and I can accept that. Like, it's, I don't like when my routine gets disrupted. I don't like when you have a software you use and then they update it and everything's in the wrong place and you're just like, thanks. I get that, but when real big changes come, that can be really hard, and we're going to cover this actually, how you can be really successful one moment and you can come crashing down, and that's a change you're going to have to adapt with, and that's hard for people to let go of that and adapt to their new lower, fortunes, right? So yeah.
I think when it comes to
Yeah, I mean, we should be looking at the first century church for our behavior, yeah. Yeah, no, but yeah, that is a good point. We need to always be looking to the Bible and doing what the Bible says, yes. Anyone other points?
Is there a difference maybe between learning from the past and having nostalgia?
Yeah, learning from the past and nostalgia are two completely different things. Nostalgia is where you're dwelling on the past and on on decisions and stuff where you're not doing it to grow yourself. You're doing it because you want to reclaim those times, because you think they're better than what you have now. Oh yes.
It's what happened to Israel during the New Testament era. What most of them did, particularly law studiers, the scribes, they always looked at the past and go, oh, back in those days, our kingdom was mighty, we were so closer, yeah, we fell occasionally, but we were closer to God. So back in those days, God was a lot more involved with us. It's like, well, God is involved, but you guys aren't in those things. Looking at it's not paying attention.
Yeah, that's another way nostalgia can manifest with a people group like the Jews who are looking back to when they had a kingdom. So in the first century, they were wanting to have their kingdom back, and they were expecting a Messiah that was going to do that for them. And they had like the zealots who were trying to make it happen in the present. And a culture can do that. A culture can look backward and just think about the days when they were a mighty empire instead of dealing with their new reality. And I mean, no empire lasts forever. This is something America is really going to start to have to grapple if our current trends go. Yes, Wayne?
No, I was just with Mark.
Okay. All right, so being wise and fearing God. So wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. So this is if you have wisdom, it's not a bad thing also to have some amount of money, because that wisdom and money can be a buffer against bad things happening to you. I mean, again, the Bible isn't against you having money, it's against you loving money. And you can also look back at like the prodigal son, right? He didn't have wisdom. He got his inheritance and he lost it really fast, right? For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. The advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. So, again, having wisdom, and again, wisdom is fearing the Lord, knowing what God wants you to do. That's going to be an advantage when things go sideways in your life, So consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? And this is the solution to what Solomon wrote in chapter 1, verse 15, when he asked, how can I, make straight what is crooked? Well, God can do it. God can make sense of all this stuff. We can't, and trying to make sense of the entire world, to understand the entire world, can drive you mad. That is one of the things Solomon is warning about in this book. And also, wisdom preserves life. This is, again, life is bust and boom cycles, right? Sometimes things are going really great, and then it drops off a cliff. And if you know how to handle that, you're going to do a lot better than if it's, you weren't thinking about these things. So in the days of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may find out anything that will be after him. So just keep that in mind. Things have gone badly in your life. God has given you the blessings, but he's also allowed you to have the downfall. And you need to be mindful that there's lessons to be learned in that. Your character can grow in that. You can learn to be stronger. And so, just be patient and just to trust in him when you're suffering. In my vain life, I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in evil doing. There's the great injustice of this world, right? Where you see good people who, get that bad things happen to them, and then you see wicked people that are just prospering because they're abusing the system. They're doing all the things that the righteous man won't do. and they're getting ahead in this world, but they're not going to be ahead in the next world. So be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Okay, so this is not telling you to be overly good. This is righteous in the sense of in a court trial where you're the person that's got on the right side of the conflict, right? So this is, but at the same time, like you can be right about something, but it might not be worth winning the argument with someone or with an authority. To use wisdom, like pick your battles is what we're talking about here, not don't be really good. Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time, right? You can believe you're so right that you can just get out there and think your way is right. And this is a way to pride, by the way, thinking that you're absolutely right. And you can make a stand and, do something stupid and get yourself killed, because you think you're doing the right thing. So just, you just need to be mindful about that. It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. So remember, fear God. So as you think about your actions, if you're the person who's fearing God, you have a better chance of coming out of these sort of things than the person who is either wicked or the one who thinks he's always right. Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in the city. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. So this is again the reminder that not one of us has not sinned, right? That even you might believe you're the most righteous person, but you've sinned. And to keep that in mind, that perhaps the bad thing that's happening to you in your life is because of your sin, even if you are mostly a good person. And, it can be easy to rally against the injustice to get it, but, you might be in this situation because of your own actions. Human sin is a universal, right? So, and this is something else to consider. So, does anyone here know virtue ethics? Virtue ethics were taught by Aristotle, and he believed you could learn and practice wisdom, that through acting good, you will become good. Like if you want to be braver, just pretend to be brave, and eventually pretending will become reality. That was his sort of thought, that you could teach someone ethics, right? That someone could practice it and actually become an ethical person. And I think this is something that kind of meshes with Christianity, where Christianity tells you to fear God and do what he would want you to do. And if you keep doing that, it'll be easier and easier for you to do it. Because, practice makes perfect, right? Well, not perfect, but closer to perfection. So how does wisdom preserve and empower those who possess it? Yes, Miss Kathy. Yeah, so wisdom helps you to make the right choices. You'll probably still mess up occasionally, but you'll probably make the right choice more often than not. And also, again, with the comment about always being right and being a know-it-all, that could be a turnoff to people. Like if you're always correcting them, like, excuse me, but it's, this, and it's some minor detail. Is it really worth, doing that to somebody all the time? I know I have that impulse in me. And it's something I fight against. But like you can be right and offend somebody in how you present your case, right? Instead of coming at them love, you can come at them with a different emotion that can hurt them and drive them away, and then you're the one who sinned, even though you were in the right. So yeah. Yes.
I think wisdom encompasses more than having the right knowledge. It has to do with how you exercise in relation to having that right knowledge. So you have patience and you have self-control and you have an assurance that God's in control
Yeah, so wisdom isn't just knowledge, that is true. The Bible is very clear that wisdom is knowledge with action, that you take this knowledge and you act on it in the way that God would want you to. And wisdom is knowing patience. Wisdom is knowing self-control. Wisdom is knowing kindness. Wisdom is knowing love. And when you're out there in the world and you're interacting with non-Christians, like, you can very easily turn them off from the gospel, even though you're telling them about God, because you're not using any of these, concepts. Yes, Kenny.
I think a lot of times I like to say or exercise to what end? What is the worth or the value of your action or statement? What's it going to do? How's it going to impact somebody? What you do and what you say. I don't know an easier way to say it than that, but I think a lot of times wisdom allows us to apply consideration in those moments. How is what I'm about to do or say, the way I'm about to do it or say it, going to impact this person? What's its worth or its value? To what end? Is this something that needs to be said or not to be said at this time? So
Yeah.
I think that wisdom allows us to accomplish those things.
Yeah, so wisdom is like reflecting on what you're about to do, on what you're about to say, or your action, and go like, what's the outcome of this going to be? Is this going to be a good outcome? Is this going to be an outcome that's worth expending my effort? Jesus said, don't scatter pearls before swines, right? There are times when it's not worth your effort. There are times when, or what you're about to do isn't going to have good results because you're listening to your heart, your emotions, right? We're not supposed to trust, our emotions. We're supposed to think about things because you can't trust your heart. The world says to follow your heart, but the world is very wrong about that because the heart leads you towards selfishness. It leads you towards, self-destruction. Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
The heart is deceitful in all things.
Yes, the heart is deceitful in all things. Yes. The heart is going to tell you the lies so that your logical brain can rationalize why you're doing something. Yeah. So what effect does recognition of God's sovereignty have on your faith in Him? Yes, Dan.
Trust is earned. And so when we look to put our trust in someone, human or God, we have two constraints. What are they willing to do, and what are they able to do? Both of those constrain how much we can trust them. So when we recognize that God has all sovereignty, all ability, that eliminates that as a constraint on how much we can trust him. Now we're learning, well, how much is he willing to do? Showed us in Christ how much he was willing to do. That's how much we can trust him.
Yeah, so God showed us in Christ just how much He's willing to do for us. And that is a good reason that we can see how we can trust Him. And also, as Jesus said, God takes care of the animals, and you're greater than an animal. You think He's not going to take care of you. You just got to trust in Him, and remember, He wants to do what's best for you, not what you think is best for you, which are very different things. Yes, Kenny.
By comparison, and this will sound weird, but by comparison, there's nothing that compares to him. We can historically look at his character and his track record, and there's nothing like him. There's no entity, no person, no anything like him. We can look at how he works presently, and we can see how he works in the future. And
yes, there is nothing like God. There's nothing in this world that can compare to what God can do. Nothing is great. Nothing is He's everlasting, right? He's eternal. Nothing in this world is eternal. You know, your friends aren't going to be eternal. Your spouse isn't going to be eternal. Well, in the next life. But in this life, no. You know, your money, everything rots, everything decays, everything breaks, right, in this world. And so you want to put your trust in something that's imperishable. Like I believe it's in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, where Paul says, an athlete's, they're competing for a perishable wreath, but we're competing for an imperishable wreath. Yeah. Okay. So here's just some more things to think about as you go through your week. If you were to create a list of 3 things that made up the good life, what would you include in it? And are you guilty of oversimplifying God's grace, believing his blessings to be payment for righteous living? And how might a non-believer be confounded by such a view of God? And that's the view everyone else has out there, right? I hear it all the time. Like, you know, it's the Mormons' view on God. It's Islam's view on God. It's everyone else's view on God that, you know, if you're good, God's going to reward you with, you know, salvation. But God isn't rewarding you with salvation. He's giving it to you. So, do not take to heart all the things people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. Yeah, which again, our sin can be the author of our own suffering. So we should be charitable with people because you know what? They might have said hurtful things to you in a moment of anger. Haven't you done the same thing though? Yeah. All this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which has been far off is deep, very deep. Who can find it? So anyways, this goes back to what he wrote in chapter 1, verse 17, where he said he was going to study all these matters, right? So he's now at the end of his studies, and he's saying, I went through all this stuff, and these are kind of what I've learned. I turned my heart to know and to search out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. And I find something more bitter than death, the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. So there is kind of a debate what Solomon is talking about here. Some people think this is talking about in Proverbs of the woman of folly that leads young men into bad decisions. And others think Solomon is talking about, and again, this is written towards men, so I'm sorry if women if this comes out a little sexist, but he's talking about if you don't marry the right woman, and you're going to have a really terrible life because all you two are going to do is going to be at loggerheads, right? Like in Genesis 3:16, God told Eve, you will try to trap your husband, but he will dominate you. So if you don't have like a godly marriage, right, you're going to be in a constant struggle. You're going to be fighting all the time. You can have a really terrible life. But again, he who pleases God, again, who fears God and had wisdom and chose a good wife is going to escape that sort of marital turmoil. So those are the two views on what Solomon is talking about here. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I found not one. One man among thousands I found, but a woman among all these I have not found. So again, this seems to be an idiom that something is very, very rare. It also might mean that he was searching for close friendships, is another idea of what this is about, and that he only found that very rarely with another man and never with a woman. Maybe because it's really hard for men and women to truly understand each other. We really do think differently, and we have sort of different priorities. Again, this is sort of up in the air exactly what Solomon is getting at, but I think the ultimate thing is it's really, 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 really rare for someone that's actually really a good person and doesn't just think they're a good person. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes, right? God made Adam upright, And Adam had a scheme after he ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that was to hide in a bush. He thought that would work. It didn't. But who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. So wisdom is a rare thing, but it can be found if you search for it. So Robert's son, on his way home from college, was killed when that drunk driver struck his car. That should be struck, not his car. The man who caused the accident is not in jail because he got off on a technicality. He's reportedly still driving drunk. Why does things like this happen? We have a very poor judicial system because it's made by men. That's right. We live in a fallen world where people sin, where people do destructive things, where people make terrible choices because, this guy, Robert, he's listening to his heart, and his heart's like, I want to get drunk. And he's like, yeah, let's just get drunk, and who cares what the consequences are? I mean, look, he got away with it. Why should he stop? Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of loopholes in the law. There's a lot of people who want to be compassionate, who think like this person's circumstances in life caused them to do this thing. We should give them a break, and then you let them out of jail, and they just hurt someone else. And we're not going to have perfect justice in this world. Bad things are going to happen to us, and it's a trap to get angry at the world, at God, because something bad happened to you. Because we do live in a fallen world, and ultimately there will be justice, yes.
C.S. Lewis takes things like this as actually evidence for heaven and God. He says, we have a strong yearning for justice. As it happens, people who study animals find they have yearning for justice also. Why? Evolution would not give a desire for something that cannot exist. That's not survival of the fittest. But we have this yearning for justice. And we live in a world that's not fair. The only way that makes sense is if there is another world we're being prepared for.
Yeah.
Justice will take place.
Yeah, so C.S. Lewis wrote that the fact that there is injustice in this world, the fact that we care about injustice is proof that we care about something that isn't found in this world, and it's a proof that there is something more. Because you're right. Because if evolution says survival of the fittest, wouldn't it be more wise that we evolved to live in an unjust world and just accept that and benefit from that instead of, reacting negatively to it? Yeah. We are about out of time, so we're going to skip through. Just think about when was the last time you found yourself ensnared in gossip, and how might it become more wise in this area? I mean, it's really easy to gossip about people, and this question too, but we are just about out of time. So this is the end here. So Ecclesiastes 8:2-17 in brief. The teacher once again returned to a familiar theme, God's sovereignty, the unanswered question of good, evil, and injustice in the future. He said we should obey the Lord as we would a king with absolute power, especially because we do not understand all of God's way. He advises that the only way to enjoy this life is to accept it with joy and faith as a gift from God. We can do this despite the fact that even wise people can never claim to discover the entire meaning of life. So, I think that is everything we need to cover today. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, please allow these lessons that the teacher has written about in Ecclesiastes to resonate in our hearts and to remind us to fear you and to remember that you are in control of this world, Lord, and that every day we have is a blessing that you have given us, Lord. And just help us not to fall into the negative traps of nostalgia and envy and pride and anger, Lord. And just be with us in our walk, Lord. In your name, amen.